Representative Caldwell.
Present.
Representative Casimiro.
Present.
Representative Corvese.
Present.
Representative Felix. Representative Lombardi. Representative Norae.
Here.
Representative Place.
The original present.
Representative Roberts. And Representative Vella-Wilkinson.
Here.
And Representative Lombardi.
Present.
14 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum, Chairman.
I'm here.
Oh,
It's David Bennett, I'm here.
okay. Okay, Representative, thank you.
Bless you.
And Leader Philippi.
Present. Welcome, Leader. Thank you. Okay. Let us begin today's hearing. This is the House Committee on Judiciary. It is Friday, March 19th, 2021. For those of you who are celebrating, it's St. Joseph's Day. I did my best to find red, which I'm colorblind, and I'm told that it's not really very red, so it was a good effort by a person that's half Irish and half Portuguese. In any event, we're here today for the gun bills, as they are so called in the media. I expect it to be a fairly long meeting. There are some rules that we've distributed. There will be 4 folks on the opposition side, 4 folks on the support side that will testify as experts, so-called. Prior to those 4 folks alternating back and forth, there will be the sponsors of the 21 bills that will put them in play. So all bills will be in play once the sponsors testify on them and answer questions from the committee members. And then we will go to a few individuals, general officers will take them first, but they, and as well as the rest of the public, will be confined to 1 minute and 15 seconds. You will hear a little ding-dong bell, I'm told, that it sounds like, go off at about a minute, and then 15 seconds later, the call will be terminated. So, your remarks should be timed accordingly. I don't want to be rude to anybody, so that, but I'm just telling you that that's what's going to happen. It's my understanding that in order to hold all these 20 bills for further study, I need a motion and a second, and we'll have a roll call vote. So do I hear a motion to hold all bills for further study?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All those, I'm sorry. Roll call vote.
Chairman Craven.
Aye.
First Vice Chair McEntee.
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Knight.
Aye.
Representative Agello.
Aye.
Representative Batista. Representative Bennett.
Aye.
Representative Caldwell.
Aye.
Representative Casimiro. Aye. Representative Corvese.
Aye.
Representative Felix.
Aye.
Representative Lombardi.
Aye.
Representative Norae.
Aye.
Representative Place.
Aye.
Representative Roberts. Aye. Representative Bella Wilkinson.
Aye.
And Leader Philippi.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Okay.
Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Dr. Corvese, you are on the floor.
before we begin tonight's proceedings, as I had indicated to you, I just wanted to make a couple of comments regarding the process.
Please do.
And let me just say that, Chairman Craven, you've had, you run this committee in an admirable fashion, and for the time that I've served on it, it certainly is apparent, not only to myself and the members here, but also those individuals watching, that you try to do a fair job of getting both sides. Mm-hmm. Now, there has been a lot of discussion publicly and much privately regarding the process tonight. You know, the Judiciary Committee, I think even more than Finance, and I realize Finance is the alleged premier committee because it handles the budget. But some of the most, if not the most important bills come out of Judiciary.
Yes.
Gay marriage, abortion, regarding all sorts of different high-profile, high-button hot button issues. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm a little disappointed in the process. I realize we're in the middle of a pandemic. I realize we have a myriad number. I think it's upwards of 350 people who want to testify for or against these bills. Now, you had said that you're going to have 4 people for, 4 people against the bill, each regarding the bills as a whole or each bill? Are you
As a
going
whole.
to take, okay, so you're going to put them all into play.
Yes.
And the individual public who are going to be speaking have a minute and 15 seconds to talk about 21 bills.
If they wanted to choose to talk on all 21, yes.
So I would be remiss if I didn't say, I think the process is a little unfair. And I think it's unfair because while you're going to have 4 and 4, pro and against, I think that the general public should have 2 minutes on each bill. Each bill should be taken separately, my opinion. Each bill should be taken separately. The sponsor and a proponent get 5 minutes, 2 opponents get 5, everybody else gets 2. But on each bill, so that they don't have to coalesce their testimony, in a sense, on 21 bills to give their opinions. We've taken some pretty hot issues over the years, and people have been able to speak as long as they want. And now I realize we're in the middle of a pandemic, or hopefully the end of it. And we also have, as I said, we have at least 350. I wouldn't mind coming back if we had to. Another day, another 2 days, another 3 days, however long it would take for the public, both pro and con, to have their say on each bill. I just want to say that I realize that there's no malice aforethought with the process. I know that there's an attempt to try to get everyone to have an opinion, speak their mind, but it's very difficult to do it in a minute and 15 seconds. I would be remiss if I did not say that. I think we're treating these bills, which are extremely important bills, a little differently than the subject matter that we've taken up in the past. And that disturbs me a great deal. Now, perhaps if we were in a pandemic, maybe things would be a little different. But going forward, if we have these type of bills again, I would like to see the process lengthened out. I thank you for the time you've given me. I have one question.
Sure.
With regard to the minute and 15 seconds, how are we, as individual members of the committee, going to, I may have a question of some of those individuals. I don't think that they should be unceremoniously hung up at the end of a minute and 15 seconds. I think that we should be at least allowed to ask a question if we want to or if we have to. So I'd like that to be kept in your mind when we're doing this process.
If you wouldn't mind, and I'm assuming that you may have some situation in place, just let me know as the person begins to testify. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question.
I will
and
do
I'll
that.
make sure that the call is not terminated so you
Good,
can answer.
because I would hate to have anyone, pro or con, unceremoniously terminated when there may be some embellishment or expansion of the testimony that they're giving. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much,
Thank you.
and appreciate your attempts to try to make this a fair hearing and a hearing that's going to give every member of the public who wishes to speak an opportunity to speak.
And on my behalf, towards your comments, I acknowledge the difficulties that we face and you point them out. But as a lawyer, I'm never at a loss for saying something or quoting something. So I believe someone a lot more important and famous than me once said that democracy is a form of government, just like this process is, but it's the best we got. So,
Chairman,
thank
I would
Yes.
like to agree with Doc on his comments. I have heard from a number of constituents that a minute and 15 seconds is not enough time to comment on 21 bills. So I just want to go on record as,
Yes,
right,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Aye as well, Chairman.
Thank you, Tom Norae as well. Okay, let us endeavor. Yes,
Well, I appreciate the fact that some folks find that this year's process is constrained with a minute and 15 to speak on the bills. There's nothing to stop anyone from writing in and fully airing their opinions in email to the legislators. I have well over 1,000 emails just in the last couple of days. I think coming in on 2,000 emails for the session only on guns, among all the other issues that we hear, both from both sides, all over the state. And for those of you who are watching, you should know that I personally have looked at every single one of them because I do my own email, and I look at where you're from, and I look at what you're saying, and I've absorbed all the points. And so there are opportunities to make your voice heard, even if it's just not the normal way of coming and showing up. I really wish you were all here today so that we could all have this debate and have it normally and in person and face to face. But that's not where we are today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Okay, let us begin. The first bill up is House Bill 5381, sponsored by Chairwoman Williams. It's an act related to criminal offenses, specifically weapons. It requires firearms sellers to be required to purchase, in order to be a purchaser, to execute a medical authorization release form for records, a release of records relating to addiction, alcoholism, mental illness for a period of up to 5 years. Is Chairwoman Williams available to us?
Doesn't seem on there. She is not on there.
Okay, then we'll go to the next bill in order, which brings us to Second Vice Chair Knight's bill, who is here, 5386. It's an act related to criminal offenses and weapons. It prohibits obtaining, purchasing, transferring a firearm on behalf of another if the other person is prohibited from possessing a firearm, with increase in penalties for those offenses and applications amended to state number of firearm purchases. Vice Chair Knight, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a straw purchasing bill. For those of you out there who don't know what a straw purchase is, it is when somebody who is legally allowed to purchase a firearm purchases it, but does so with the intention to pass it on to someone who is not allowed to own a firearm. Why do we call it a straw purchase? Because in the law, we have the idea of the straw man, like a scarecrow, that we always describe in law school as the pass-through person. So that's a little trivia for you. But basically, this is not illegal in Rhode Island now. This would make it illegal in Rhode Island. And this is one of the big ways that firearms end up in the hands of felons, of people who are otherwise not allowed to possess, is that there are some folks out there who make a living, a habit, out of purchasing handguns legally and then turning around and selling them in the black market to those who are not supposed to have them. Sometimes they cross state lines. Sometimes they do it locally. It's a problem. It's every single firearm that is on the street came onto the street, generally speaking, through at the start through some legal transaction. It was sold from a firearms dealer. It went from a factory to a firearms dealer to a person authorized to hold because we assume that transaction from the firearms dealer is lawful and legal. But then they end up in the hands of felons and people who aren't supposed to have them otherwise, and sometimes they're used to commit crimes. And this law, if passed, would give the Attorney General and our law enforcement community a really good tool to take a bite out of that flow of firearms into unauthorized hands.
Thank you. Any questions of the sponsor? Yes, Minority Leader Filippi.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Knight. I actually like the intent of this bill. Enforcing the law about people not owning firearms is something that many of us in the firearms community have said is long overdue, and we need better enforcement. I just have a question about the language where the transfer knows or reasonably should know. It's the reasonably should know I'm concerned about. Could you kind of maybe for the public explain how someone would run afoul of this law if they don't have specific knowledge that the recipient is ineligible for firearm ownership?
That's a good question, Leader, and it could come up in a lot of different ways. What we're creating a criminal statute here, right? So we always have to attach a mindset next to the act when we do criminal law. So knows is easy, right? If you know the person, let's say someone purchases 5 handguns and wants to resell them. If someone comes up and says, I'm a felon and I'm going to buy your gun anyway, then that would be a knowing situation. I think reasonably should know is fact specific. It would be up to law enforcement to sort of see what the nature of the transaction was. And there may be a case where it's all but obvious that someone is not allowed to own, but they sell them or otherwise give them a firearm anyway. So that that section is in there so that we can do we can analyze each transaction that may come to the attention of law enforcement with the idea of, all right, he didn't say anything, but is it totally obvious that this is a person who's not allowed to have a firearm?
And one more brief question. Excuse me. Is the intent to only cover like transfer of ownership of the firearm, or if I go to a range with a buddy and I let him shoot my firearm, would that come within the ambit of this legislation? Would that be obtaining a firearm for someone if I, hand them a shotgun to shoot some skeet?
So the proposed law says no person shall knowingly purchase or otherwise obtain a firearm on behalf of another person or transfer a firearm when the transfer knows or reasonably should know. So if you go with your buddy to the range, but you know that your buddy, had a felony conviction somewhere behind you, then yeah, that would prevent that transfer.
Okay, so it's not just about transfer of ownership, long-term possession. It's me handing someone a firearm for 5 minutes. That would come under the ambit of this law.
So that's a good question. I would say that transfer is the dictionary definition of transfer. There's some discretion there on the part of law enforcement to determine whether or not they would want to, if you just handed a guy a gun and said, basically, hold my weapon while I turn around and do something and then grab it back, that's one thing. If you transfer ownership, that's another thing. And law enforcement will be in a position to figure out how they wanted to handle each. But for our purposes today, and my understanding, transfer is transfer, and I'm assigning the dictionary definition.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Doc.
To the sponsor, if I may. So would you be willing, with the type of example that Leader Philippi brought up, to modify the parameters of the transfer?
I'm more than willing at all times to talk to anybody about legislation and what it might take to move this bill through. I will say that I think it's pretty clear the way it is. I like transfer the way it is, but I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Any further questions? Dave?
So if we're not changing anything if we're making a change to existing law, why is it the only thing that we're changing on the form when you purchase the weapon is the number being purchased? I think the intent, the straw purchase intent, if it's not illegal, if it's not illegal to do it now, why isn't there something on the form that actually addresses it and acknowledges the fact that it's a new thing? The form doesn't change, so when the purchaser goes, the only new thing for them that they see is number of pistols or revolvers to be purchased. And I think the same thing is on the rifle form and everything like that. And I'm just wondering if it's not already illegal. I was under the assumption it was already illegal as a firearms owner to do this. Why the only change on the form is the number being purchased?
Well, it seems to me that the common sense answer to your question is that when we know that when somebody going into a firearms store and buying 20 or 30 pistols at a whack is a somewhat unusual transaction. The change in the form would alert the authorities to the fact that this may be a straw purchaser. And I think that's fairly obvious. There are all kinds of things that are on the books these days that are legal that, not everybody in society knows about. But so that part of the question I don't quite get. The reason that the form has changed is just to give law enforcement on the background check a heads up.
Yes, Dave?
Is this already legal federally?
Federally, I can't quote chapter and verse from you federally, but I will tell you that my understanding is that you can't just willy-nilly transfer a firearm federally. You have to jump through some hoops, even if it's just a private sale. I've only seen a couple of cases that deal with this, and they usually come along with the charge of unlawful dealing of weapons without a dealer's license.
Any further questions of the sponsor? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 5395, sponsored by Representative O'Brien. It's an act related to education, maintenance of order on the campus. It specifically empowers the Rhode Island Board of Higher Education to mandate that campus police at state institutions of higher education be not only allowed to be armed, but also that the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights apply to them in their conduct and their behaviors. Representative O'Brien asked me to put it in play. I can answer some general questions, but I think the explanation is apparent. If there are no questions of the members, we'll go on to the next one. Now, there will be three bills sponsored by Representative Caldwell. The first is 5553. It is sponsored by all the general officers, although I don't want to speak definitively of the new governor. I think it does say Lieutenant Governor on here, so I guess he is in support of it. And it's an act related to criminal offenses, weapons, felonies to store. It's a felony to store firearms unlocked. The next one is 5554. Again, the Attorney General and the other general officers sponsored this. It's an act related to criminal offenses, large capacity feeding device ban. It bans firearm magazines, those clips they call them, that hold 10 or more rounds. And the last one by Representative Caldwell is 5556, again sponsored by all of the general officers as well as others. And it's an act related to criminal offenses, assault weapons. It bans the possession, sale, and transfer of an assault weapon. Representative Caldwell, you have 3 minutes each bill, or 9 minutes total.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going for the total, so it will be.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So the sponsors get 3 minutes each?
Correct.
The experts will get 3 minutes each for each bill?
No. The experts will get, the agreement was all sponsors, and in this instance, Representative Caldwell is sponsoring 3 bills. So all bills will get 3 minutes from their sponsor. And in this instance, this individual, this representative has sponsored 3 bills. So I think she's the only one that has multiple bills other than Representative Williams. Has 2. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. So yes, I'm here to introduce 3 bills: a ban on the sale of assault weapons, a limit on high-capacity magazines, and a safe storage bill, all in concert with a majority of my House colleagues and all of our general officers, now Governor Dan McKee, Treasurer Seth Magaziner, Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea, and Attorney General Norae. And so for those of you who have seen my testimony on this before, I want to start similarly today by telling you a story. It is 11 days before Christmas. It's around 9 a.m. A young man finds his mother in bed in her pajamas and he shoots and kills her. At around 9:40, he drives to a nearby elementary school, armed with a rifle and 10 30-round magazines. He shoots his way into a first-grade classroom. Warned by the noise and screaming colleagues, 2 teachers shepherd their first graders into a bathroom, where their bodies were found huddled together dead from his gunfire. 2 teachers and 15 first graders, dead. 1 survivor, a 6-year-old girl, the same age as my daughter Lulu, says, "Mommy, I'm okay, but all my friends are dead." He continues on, entering classrooms with young children hiding under desks and in coat closets, with teachers putting their lives on their lines for their students, and he kills 12 more people. 2 of these people were 6-year-old Dylan Hockley, a 6-year-old boy, whose body was found under his teacher's, Anne Marie Murphy, who had put her body between his and the shooter's and had died trying unsuccessfully to save his life. Then finally, he walks into another classroom and shoots himself dead. The police arrive at the school 3.5 minutes after the first call to 911. The shooting took about 5 minutes, with the shooter firing off more than 150 rounds. While I wish with all my heart this was a far-fetched hypothetical story that I was using to justify my introduction of these bills, it is not. It's the story of what actually happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, only 2 hours away from here. We hear these stories too often in America, and it's these stories that illustrate the urgency of passing these bills. I have also heard a lot of bad arguments against these bills. I've heard that they are unconstitutional, but they are not. The Second Amendment and the Rhode Island Constitution don't confer a limitless right to own weapons of any kind. I've heard that these bills will only affect criminals, not law-abiding citizens, but that's not true. Many mass shootings, including the recent rampage in Atlanta, have been committed by people who acquired their guns legally. Nicholas Cruz bought the guns he used at Parkland legally. Devin Patrick Kelly passed a federal background check. He was a law-abiding citizen until he used those guns to kill 26 people at a church. Stephen Paddock legally purchased 33 firearms. He was a law-abiding citizen until he shot over 500 people in Las Vegas. The Sandy Hook guns were purchased legally, but then not stored safely, and that's why we also need a safe storage law. I've heard that these bills will do nothing if we don't focus on the mentally ill, but that's not true. People with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violent crimes, not perpetrators. And many people who kill with guns are not mentally ill. These weapons we're talking about in these bills just enable them to kill more people faster. I've heard that people need these weapons to protect themselves against home invaders, but that's absurd. You simply do not need a 100-round drum to see off a home invader. I've heard that since we've been lucky enough not to have a mass shooting in Rhode Island yet, that we don't need to do anything. But that is simply a crazy argument. That when we have the ability to prevent harm, we should wait until people die before taking action. I've heard that because a lot of people commit gun violence with other kinds of weapons, that we shouldn't do anything about these particular weapons. But mass shootings inflict a special kind of trauma on a community. Talk to anyone from Newtown, and you'll hear for some people from Newtown tonight. The fact that we can't stop all gun violence does not mean we shouldn't do things that will save lives. I've heard that the best way to prevent gun violence is a good guy with a gun. But in Dayton, Ohio, police officers, good guys with guns, took the shooter there down in 32 seconds. But because of these weapons, he had already shot 26 people. Good guys with guns do not work. I've heard that most people are against these bills, but they are not. I knock on every door in my district, and these bills are overwhelmingly popular. Polls have been taken nationally in Rhode Island and find the same thing. If you poll your friends from the gun club, you might find something different, though I hear from a lot of gun owners who also support these bills. But the opponents are a clear minority, and the majority is looking to us for protection and safety for themselves and their families. But what I've heard most in the angry and sometimes threatening messages I've received is that we need a population heavily armed as a check against government power, that they're preparing for a second civil war, that if these laws pass, they will defy them, that they will come to my house and show me what an assault weapon can do. And so that is really what we are up against as representatives, a movement that glorifies violence and the use of force as a means of exercising political power, like we saw at the Capitol on January 6th. A movement that brought zip-tie handcuffs to the Capitol, chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and tried to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Anti-government demonstrators protesting COVID restrictions carried rifles into the public gallery of the Michigan State Senate while the Senate was in session. They want to retain an unlimited right to possess weapons of war. I don't think that's good policy for ordinary Rhode Islanders, and my constituents don't either. Not every gun owner is a part of this movement, but this movement is at the center of the opposition to these bills, and I know because I hear from them all day, every day. And so, to those folks and all of you, all the threats that you have sent me have made me afraid for myself and for my kids and for my family. So congratulations, you have succeeded in making a young mother feel afraid. But the reason I've been fighting for these bills is because the epidemic of gun violence and mass shootings has made us all afraid. When I got the call from my kids' school that they were locking down the campus, I was afraid. I used to work as an organizer with the LGBT community, and after the Pulse nightclub shooting, they were afraid. Students here in Rhode Island held a huge rally on these steps just outside because after the Parkland shooting, they were afraid. Rhode Islanders should not have to feel afraid of when the first mass shooting will happen here, and they certainly should not stand by believing that nothing can be done, because something can be done. We can pass these common sense reforms, and I ask my fellow committee members to join me in supporting them. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Representative Caldwell. Any questions of the sponsor of the three bills? Dave Place.
Yes, Representative. I'm not going to get into politics. We're talking about the legislation that's before us. You gave the example of Newtown, and I'm wondering, how would these bills have prevented a Newtown?
Thank you, Representative. You know, the point of these bills is that there will be less of these weapons in circulation, right? The more of these weapons we have in circulation, the more opportunity there is for people to get them and use them. And so obviously over time, with less weapons in circulation, people will have less access to those guns. That is not rocket science, that is math.
So your definition of the compelling interest that the state has in restricting what has been codified as an individual right by the Supreme Court doesn't actually accomplish the compelling interest that you're claiming.
That is not, I don't agree with that statement. You're putting a lot of phrases and words in there that I did not say that I don't agree with.
Well, this is the Judiciary Committee. We deal in facts, we deal in the law.
I'm aware of that. I'm a member
still
of this
speaking.
committee.
I didn't interrupt your comments. I'm going to continue. And in order for a government body to restrict a codified constitutional right, we have to have a compelling interest. And my understanding of your compelling interest is you want to prevent another Newtown. Is that correct?
These bills do all sorts of things. Obviously, they are aimed at helping reduce the amounts of mass shootings, and they are also aimed at, when we have mass shootings or big violent acts like that, reducing the amount of deaths that happen at those events.
So you claim that there's an epidemic of mass shootings. What is the baseline you use to claim an epidemic?
You can ask the Department of Health that, perhaps. They are obviously the public health experts that might testify tonight or have sent in written testimony.
It's your testimony. I want to know what you understand it to be, because I want to understand your reasoning for presenting this legislation to the public.
experts in public health far more knowledgeable than I am. We obviously talk about and vote on issues where we're not experts all the time, have said there's an epidemic of gun violence. I've spoken with them. I believe them. You do not, and that's fine.
And there's just one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Do we have a fiscal note on this legislation in terms of how it impacts both sales tax revenue combined with the firearms themselves, the ancillary equipment that comes along with them, and also the way that we access Pittman Robinson information from the federal government?
We do not have a fiscal note that would meet those questions that you had.
So, I mean, is it my understanding that we do need those for any legislation that's brought before or presented does require that by law if it's going to have a fiscal impact?
That would be something that we would be dealing with if this bill is placed down for a vote and the discussion takes place, or any other additional information that will become apparent after this hearing that we have today.
Thank you.
Dr. Corvese.
I don't have a question for Representative Caldwell, but I'm very glad that her statements got to the actual crux of the matter. It is the foundation of the reasons of these anti-Second Amendment bills. The point of these pieces of legislation, the point of the anti-gun movement is to reduce the number of guns in society. And when you do that, you are reducing the number of guns by a majority. That majority are law-abiding citizens. Criminals will not obey these laws. And if someone has, unfortunately, an evil intent, they will pursue it, no matter how they have to do it. The laws will not stop them. But I'm very pleased, especially for the individuals watching today, especially my friends and constituents who are watching today, that is the crux of the matter. The theory is reduce the number of weapons, but by reducing the number of weapons, we have to take them away from law-abiding citizens. We have to constrict their ability to buy them, to use them. And eventually, if you continue that logic, then the only people who are going to have guns will be the criminals. Like those people who were walking in Foster the other day. So, I'm pleased that came out early in the session. It will certainly, I'm sure we're going to hear more of this as we continue, but I'm glad that point was made. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You wish to respond, Representative Hall?
Thank you, Chairman. You know, to be clear, you can have that point of what all these bills' intents are, Doc, you know, but that is not what I said. I am referring to these, this is my time to talk. I am referring to these.
Less number of guns in society.
Doc, it's my time to talk right now. I'm a member of this committee, and my time is of equal value as yours. I said less of these weapons that my bills point out. They do not talk about all guns. They do not talk about your handguns that you can use to protect your home. They talk about assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. So do not twist my words to use them for your own argument here. That's not right, and you are a better friend and representative than that.
1 minute, Representative Rangel-Vesser. Go ahead.
Okay. All right.
We only have the hyphen in common, Chairman.
And you're both women, so I got two factors. I apologize.
That's all right. Representative Caldwell, I wanted to speak to you with regards to House Bill 5554, and that is entitled the Large Capacity Feeding Device Ban. So my question to you is, where did the number 10 come from? I'd like to understand that, and how 10 became the focal point as a large capacity.
Thank you, Chairwoman. That is a question I had as well, so thank you for asking. What I can tell you is that 10 is the number that states began to use, and I believe the federal government also may have used. And so all the research based on how many gun deaths happen, at these mass shootings and that sort of thing are based on the fact that limiting magazines to 10 rounds really makes a difference in terms of human lives.
I have a follow-on question, thank you. So my concern, especially with the issue of a clip that holds 10 rounds, is that many of the handguns, the manufacturers actually have designed the handgun to hold larger than 10, which means that you're going to, if this is made into law, that not you, but we as a legislature would be forcing gun owners to purchase equipment on the aftermarket. So it's not made, if the gun is made for 14 rounds, if it's a Glock, for instance, that's made to hold 14 rounds and one in the chamber, and this is a conversation I had with Chairman Bennett the other day at the Vets Auditorium. He was under the impression that if he didn't put more than 9 rounds, that he would be legal. As I'm reading it, it bans the actual device that holds, correct? So that you wouldn't be allowed to even have the clip that holds the full amount of rounds, even if you only put in 9 rounds. But if you're using equipment that was not designed for the gun, you're actually making it less safe. I mean, the manufacturers know the precision that's needed in order for the handgun to fire effectively and efficiently. And we're saying, no, we know better than you. And so how are we going to handle that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that we can handle that, and I can send everyone all the info after this. So most of the major gun manufacturers, actually all of them, I think, in reaction to a lot of these laws being passed in many other states, now make devices that, yes, you will have to purchase, but that can be put on your device or your gun, so that way they will be in compliance with these laws. And if for some reason this bill is written in a way to not allow that, although my understanding is that it is, I would be happy to do that.
One last point that I would like to make with regards to this is that, and I think you would agree, that not everyone that purchases a handgun is purchasing it for the use of madness and mayhem.
I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. So shooting is a sport, and a lot of people engage in it as a sport. I mean, if you went down to Camp Yagu, the Boy Scout camp, they spent a considerable amount of money upgrading their range and teaching children, not only from Rhode Island, but all over the nation that go there, the safe use of a firearm. So what happens to our junior Olympic teams? What happens to our competitive shooters and all of scholarship money and award money that goes to it? So we're just going to wipe that completely out as a sport. There are other sports that are in this, that are participated in this state, that put people at harm. I mean, there's a lot of scientific and medical research that talks about what happens when children are not properly fitted for helmets. And you mentioned that your son is into football, so I'm sure that you're into that as well. So how do you make the distinction that one sport is bad, but the other sport is good?
Yeah, so one of the things we have talked about, so I also went to a gun range and talked to some of the folks there about what they do with their youth league. And so, first of all, one thing to remember is people, they can still have 10-round magazines, first of all. So they can still go, they can shoot 10 rounds in their sport, and then they can reload their gun with another 10-round magazine. There also has been a lot of talk behind the scenes with all of us about some of the things that might be allowed at the gun ranges that we haven't thought of when we originally drafted these bills and introduced them. So I think talking about things like that is certainly something, as Representative Knight said, that I am always open to talking about with you anytime.
So then you're saying that if the magazine holds 10 rounds, that is not going to make it an illegal piece of equipment?
No, it can hold 10 rounds, that's right.
Thank you, Chairman Vella-Wilkinson. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. This question is for Representative Caldwell. You mentioned mental illness, and I believe that that is the crux of the problem here is mental illness. But you made a statement that mentally ill people are more likely to be victims to gun violence instead of perpetrators. Can you tell me where that came from?
People with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of violent crimes than they are to be perpetrators. That came from years of me researching and writing a dissertation about people with mental illnesses. I don't have the exact singular citation for that off the top of my head.
Okay, going this way, Representative, Second Vice Chair Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair,
Yes.
Rep. Caldwell, thank you for bringing these bills. On the three that you've sponsored, does any of those bills prevent anyone from purchasing and owning a pistol, a shotgun, or a long gun to defend their homes?
No, absolutely, they do not prevent that.
Thank you. I'll also note for the record, I'm just a couple of things that have come up in the questioning so far. I think it's worth saying that since this is the Judiciary Committee, the compelling interest test in constitutional law only applies to a couple of very, very, very specific types of laws that typically revolve around race and ethnicity. Otherwise, most laws have to pass the rational test, which does not involve a compelling government interest. There are plenty of laws that limit each and every one of the rights in the Bill of Rights that are only have to pass the rational, the rational basis test. And and the other thing, when it comes to the high capacity magazines, Rep. Caldwell is absolutely right. Most of the major gun manufacturers have made rounds have made magazines that are legal in the 10-round states. They've adapted either by pinning the mags or changing the internal structure so that the cartridges, the bullets go in and the bottom of the mag is narrowed out a little bit so that even if the mag is made for 14 or 16 rounds or whatever it is, right, it still fits into the pistol. It's just the internal structure of the magazine limits the amount of rounds to 10, and that comes directly from the manufacturer for their own firearms. Thank you.
Representative Norae.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm glad you brought that up, Rep. Knight, because I'm going to show you two different magazines. So, Rep. Caldwell, these are two different magazines. These are for a 9mm firearm. One is a 10-round, California compliant is what the gun community calls it, and one is a 15-round magazine. Both of them have removable floor plates in them. So the term large capacity feeding device shall include an ammunition feeding device with a removable floor plate or end plate is what is defined in this legislation, House Bill 5554, as a large capacity magazine. And on page 2, line 12, permanently modify the large capacity feeding device such that it cannot hold more than 10 rounds. So the manufacturer is manufacturing these that they cannot permanently be made so that they can't hold 15 rounds. So both of these magazines under this would now become illegal, and that is, again, a California compliant 10-round magazine and a 15-round magazine. So again, back to Rep. Vella-Wilkinson, the cost for the gun owner, many of these magazines would now become illegal, and someone would become a violator of this law just for the mere possession and now become a felon. So again, this is definitely a flaw in this bill.
Set. Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry.
I thank you for pointing that out because that's been brought up to me a lot. I believe the proposed statute says that we're interested in magazines that have a removable floor plate and are readily convertible. And I don't have the exact language in front of me because I don't have the bill in front of me. There it is, 54. Thanks. Just bear with me. Yeah, the term large capacity feeding device shall include an ammunition feeding device with a removable floor plate or end plate if the device can be readily extended to accept more than 10 rounds of ammunition. So the California compliant Glock clip that you have there, is that pinned or is that narrowed internally?
You just have to pop the floor plate off and change the spring.
But if it's,
Floor plate comes off, change the spring, it'll hold 15.
what makes that, on that specific magazine, what makes it a 10-round magazine? Is it a
the spring
pin?
inside, it's a 10-round magazine. It's identified as a 10, this is identified as a 15.
Right, so does it have a
Correct.
device in the bottom to prevent, because there's lots of ways of doing that, right?
Well, I'd have to pop it open to show you, but again,
I'm going to bet,
spring goes all the way to the bottom, spring goes all the way to the bottom.
I'm going to bet that the magazine that you have in your hand, and we would have to, go off and experiment with it, is not readily convertible. All the gun manufacturers understand to a T, because it's their business, how these laws work and how they can make compliant magazines. I'm going to bet that that 10-round California compliant magazine that you have in your hand would be compliant under our law if we took a close look at it.
Well, the word permanently on page 2 would probably make me object or have a different opinion.
Okay.
Thank you. Leader Philippi, you had a question.
Briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's for Rep. Caldwell. Hi, Rep. Caldwell. I'm sorry you experienced what you experienced with those emails. It's inappropriate. It should never happen, no matter what side of an issue you are on. I'll say from the thousands of emails I've gotten, the vast majority have been respectful, and that comes from both sides of the issue. So I don't want to cloud this debate with the few jerks out there who would say something inappropriate to you. I want to respond just to a couple things and then ask a question or two, please. The first is, in your statement, you said, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, that the anti-government movement is at the center of opposition to these bills. And I would just like to respectfully suggest that that's not accurate, is that there are people who have deeply held philosophical beliefs about their right to maintain and keep firearms, and that those people shouldn't be painted improperly by a very small minority of people out there who act in a way I think that we all find objectionable, especially as it relates to the Capitol on January 6th. The people who broke the law should be in jail. I think most of my Republican colleagues agree with that. But I think it's inappropriate to paint lawful Americans who own firearms with the actions of that very small minority. I don't think we should do that in any type of debate.
Do you want me to?
You can respond, yeah,
Sure.
then, no,
So,
please.
Thank you, Leader. In response to that, it is great that a lot of the majority of emails that you are getting are respectful, but when I prepare my testimony and I think about why I think these bills are important and why they should pass, it is not a few jerks. So I'm sure you can empathize that. I know you and I enjoy very much having our debates about our philosophical differences, but this, I can speak clearly and honestly and truthfully that actually the majority of people that I am hearing from, that is who they are. I understand your experience is different, and you would paint the movement in a different light, but that is not the light in which I experience it, and that is really what led me to talk about that issue in my testimony, our different experiences.
I mean, maybe I misspoke. I don't think there is a monolithic movement, right? I think there's a lot of people. There may be certain movements within the firearm owning community and the firearm advocacy community, but I don't think you can classify that as a movement. I think the movement you were speaking about were people who maybe have extremist views, and I think they represent an extreme minority of the firearm community that would oppose restrictions on the Second Amendment. And that's just my opinion from being a member of that community.
Well, I hear you, but that is a huge majority of the people from that community I am hearing from. So that is what I meant to say.
I understand. So I would just like to put out for the record that there's a lot more people out there who are polite, and I think the vast majority of gun owners are respectful, and I'm just sorry you're hearing from the ones that aren't. That's my opinion just from personal experience on the matter.
Thank you, and I would hope in your position as leadership in your party, you might say that in a more public way than even just here, that would not be an appropriate way to deal with your problems with people's bills. But go on.
I don't know if there's a more public place than right now, but thank you. The notion that we're going to ban large capacity magazines, I understand your perspective. Do we have any idea of how many firearm owners in the state of Rhode Island that would affect?
I do not know. I imagine the Attorney General's office might know when they come up to testify, and we're going to have some law enforcement officers testifying in favor of the bills as well. They're probably better suited to answer that question. Well, they're certainly better suited than I am to answer that question.
Okay, do we know the last 2 times that a so-called assault weapon was used in a crime in the state of Rhode Island?
Again, I think that would be a question better suited for the law enforcement officers.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would just respectfully suggest, Mr. Chairman, that before we discuss banning something that is owned by thousands and thousands of Rhode Islanders, we have empirical data that they're actually used in crimes in this state. And from everything I've seen, Mr. Chairman, the vast majority of gun crimes in the state, and let's note that we have the 4th lowest gun crime rate in the entire United States, the vast majority of firearms that are used in crimes are handguns that don't even take 10 rounds. So I just think if we're going to be dealing with issues that we face, i.e. crimes, we should be focused on the firearms that are perpetrating them. And I don't know how you do, because most of those are handguns that are revolvers and also have magazines that hold less than 10. So I don't know what we're going after here. Lastly, I just want to say that, many people who are supporting these bills from the outside, and I'm having trouble reconciling that I heard many individuals who are opposed to the Second Amendment for the past 4 years lament the fact that they felt we had a fascist president. And I've heard that from some colleagues in this building, but they support removing people's Second Amendment rights. I just don't think those positions you can reconcile. And I got to put that out there because I'm hearing contradictory statements from many people who are supporting this bill, and I want some consistency when we're dealing with constitutional rights, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Roberts, and then I'll get to Representative. Go ahead. Do you have a microphone there? Yeah. Julie, you're next.
Thank you. So I had a couple of questions for Rep. Caldwell. I just want to let you know that, first of all, the Second Amendment community definitely does not condone that kind of behavior that you speak of. That's first. The other thing is, I just have a question myself as to if they're really that serious why you haven't filed an official report with the police. Because I know I myself would never tolerate that. If it was serious, I'd go to the police. That'd be the end of it.
I don't think that's a question that's appropriate for this committee hearing. That's unrelated to these bills completely.
Julie?
I just had a follow-up to Leader Philippi's comment about the assault rifles. I've asked that question of the Attorney General's office, and I've given them a week to respond, and they haven't responded.
And that question was, when was the last time an assault rifle was used in a crime in the state of Rhode Island?
I asked them how many crimes were committed with an assault rifle in the last 10 years.
Thank you.
Vice Chair McEntee.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to make a general comment in support of these bills. And I know Representative Place talked about a compelling interest. Jason straightened us out with the rational test. But when I look back at Australia, back in 1996, 35 people were killed by a gunman wielding a semi-automatic weapon at the former prison colony and tourist attraction in Tasmania. Now, they have since banned guns in Australia. We've all heard that, okay? So it's been approximately 25 years. The number of Australia's mass shootings dropped from 11 in the decade before 1996 to 1 in the years since. So we're talking in 25 years, they've only had 1 mass shooting. I believe these bills are aimed at mass shootings. We're not trying to take the guns away. We are trying to avoid mass shootings of innocent people. Now, the other side of this is, although the laws in Australia were designed specifically to reduce mass shootings, the rates of homicide and suicide have also come down dramatically since 1996. I mean, we could fix a lot of societal problems with these bills, and we are not taking the guns away. I will say this every time someone says we are. We are trying to avoid a mass shooting like the one in Orlando, like the one in Parkland, like the one in Sandy Hook. And we can go on. I mean, this country has been devastated by mass shootings, way more than Australia ever saw. They had one big mass shooting, and they banned them completely. And we're still talking about it. And every time one happens, we all cry a little bit. We all feel like we should have done something. Well, now we're trying. So, you know, I just want people to know there is concrete evidence that banning these types of weapons and limiting magazines do produce results, the results that we as a society want. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Second Vice Chair Knight?
Mr. Chairman, I think I fully agree with Vice Chair McEntee's statements, but I also think it's important for the committee to know what we are and what we aren't doing when it comes to the Constitution, because I think that's a really important question. The leader indicated that these bills would take away Second Amendment rights, and I think it's important to clarify that the Second Amendment right exists, and we are not in a position to take it away. Right? No one is. However, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's not an absolute right. No one has the right to do anything under the Bill of Rights without some reasonable regulation. There's reasonable regulations attached to the First, there's reasonable regulations attached to the Fourth, there's reasonable regulations attached to the Sixth, to the Seventh, to the Eighth, right? And the Second is no different. So when we view these bills from a constitutional perspective, we have to remember that what the Constitution allows is somebody to bear arms to protect themselves and to protect their home. There is some constitutional language around the types of arms that may be used, but without question, the banning of high-capacity magazines has been found to be constitutional. The banning of assault weapons has been found to be the banning of high-capacity magazines has been found to be constitutional. The banning of assault weapons has also been found to be constitutional by some of the highest courts in our land. Everyone should remember that as we do our thing here.
Dr. Corvese?
I can respect Representative Caldwell and Representative McEntee and Representative Knight's position on this. Keep in mind that just because there's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation between what may happen with something within one society as opposed to another. We have a very strong tradition of the right to bear arms in this country, right from its inception. And I can understand Representative McEntee saying that we're not trying to take them away, but with some of the comments and some of the language that has been proposed, it would seem that is really not the case. That we are trying to limit the number of weapons, limit the number of guns, and try to take them away. I know that in one of these bills somewhere tonight there's a registration. If we have learned nothing, if we've learned nothing from history, is that registration is usually the first step towards confiscation. You know, they say it can't happen here. Well, January 6th was an interesting event. Certain things could possibly happen. Don't want them to happen. And I agree with Representative Leader Philippi. The comments that Representative Caldwell got by whatever extremist or fringe that they made was highly inappropriate. But we have law-abiding citizens who want to keep their right to bear arms. Okay, and that's what we have here. We have a number of bills that chip away at the Second Amendment. We have a number of bills that appear to many, not a minority, that is a slippery slope, especially when you have the word registration in a bill, in which I know we're going to come to. So I respect Representative Caldwell and Representative McEntee and Representative Knight's comments, but with all due respect, history has taught us many things. One thing we should never do is repeat it.
Any further questions of the sponsor? Yes, Representative Roberts.
Thank you. For Bill 553, it is meant to, it says it's a felony to store firearms unlocked. So I just have a question. If you were a single female and you don't have a husband, obviously you're single, okay, say you have some disability issues, you can't hear, say somebody's outside your house at night, say you've got a broken leg even, you can't defend yourself, totally defenseless. Say you've got somebody who, you know, wants to get at you and they want to get in your house. Now it's going to take some time for the police to show up. How would you defend yourself? Because I'm just curious, like what would be your remedy if it takes the police a while to show up? I mean, in this type of circumstance, you're not going to really sit there and say, well, excuse me, hold on, I need time to load my weapon. I mean, I'm just curious as to what you would do.
Representative, my understanding is that most gun owners, you know, from what I hear from members of the committee and the 2A, well, I don't like to use that term, the firearm community here, you know, store their guns safely, actually already. You know, even from members of this committee who say they would use them for home defense, say they store their guns safely and properly. So, you know, you know, that would be what I would hope. You would store your guns safely, and then you could use them if, you know, you had the very unfortunate occurrence of a home invader at your house.
Well, then, that being said, if they store them safely anyway, which I'm sure they do, I don't see the purpose of why we need this piece of legislation, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Well, that puts it into law. That makes it not an option. It makes it a requirement, obviously.
Representative, please.
So, the Safe Storage Act, as you presented it, you don't have a caveat in there for law enforcement. How do you envision that impacting the way that law enforcement currently stores their firearms, going to courthouses in the recommended manner in which the state police ask their troopers to store their firearms overnight in their residence?
Well, I haven't heard from the state police that their only objection to this bill was that their officers need to be able to store their arms in a different way than the manner in this bill. If they want to reach out to me and talk to me about that, I'd be happy to hear from them.
Any further questions of the sponsor? All right. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave?
Thank you. These bills are only going to affect the law-abiding citizens. Criminals do not listen to our laws. They do not obey our laws. If we go to a 10-shot clip, the criminal's still going to use a 14-shot clip. They can banana clip them together. They're not going to follow our laws. So we're passing laws here that have a potential for harm, but not by law-abiding citizens. It's strange that we're passing bills like this. Put a bill that would ban guns from domestic violence. We did that. The red flag. The red flag would have probably helped Representative Caldwell, but she doesn't want to talk about it, but that's okay. We cannot pass laws that's going to affect thousands of law-abiding citizens. You know, the most popular guns owned for concealed carry and for house protections are Glock, Sig Sauer. They all hold 14 in their clip, and they hold 1 in the chamber. I don't know of any criminal that's going to walk up to a store and say, gee, I can only use a 10-shot clip. You know, it's going to be the law-abiding citizen that's going to say, now I got to go out and buy 3 10-shot clips. and I just don't think that's what we should be doing, passing laws against people that have not committed any crimes. If somebody's doing domestic terrorism, anything like that, they're not law-abiding citizens. Those are the people we need to go after. The mentally ill people. We got a better screen so they can't get guns. And I think Representative Williams' bill mentions that, or we haven't got into it yet. But anytime we pass law, motorcycles are dangerous. Would outlaw motorcycles? Hockey is dangerous. Would outlaw hockey? We can't pass bills that are going to affect the law-abiding citizen. It's just insane. We got to go after the criminals, and the criminals don't obey our laws. So why are we passing laws that they're not going to obey to be safer? I just don't understand it. And the large capacity gun, you're talking about 4 bullets, but no, they'll just carry more clips. It's a scary thought that we're passing bills that hurt people that haven't done anything. They shoot at the range, and they may hunt or whatever they do. They're not criminals, and we can't treat them like criminals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Bennett. Yes, Representative Caldwell, you wish to respond?
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you, Chairman Bennett. As much as it might be kind of cool sometimes, we do not live in the world of Minority Report. So, we cannot see the future and what people are going to do with these weapons. And like the chairs, both McEntee and Knight, I have to clear up this argument that this will only affect law-abiding citizens. That is simply incorrect. In my testimony, I talked about how some of the people, the person who is at fault for the largest mass shooting we have ever had in the United States of America, bought all of his guns legally. He was a law-abiding citizen until he did that. We can't.
He's mentally ill.
That's your designation. You cannot sit here, none of us can sit here and determine what the mental state is of any number of people who have committed these, and that's offensive to the mental health community in general. But the point is, people buy these guns legally. They do not steal them. They are allowed to have them. They are not prevented from buying them. And so that is a myth that is simply incorrect.
Representative...
Can I respond?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Dave.
Okay.
Chairman Bennett.
Anybody that shoots a large amount of people for no reason at all is mentally ill. No matter what, are they angry? Are they super depressed? Are they, I don't think they're mentally ill like the kid in Connecticut. He was on the spectrum of autism. His mother shouldn't have had those guns where he could get them, and he killed her. And so you're going to say that, that he wasn't mentally ill. He was very mentally ill. The guy that shot the congresswoman, very mentally ill. And you can look at people. I've worked in the psychiatric field a long time, and I know just by looking at somebody, talking with them enough, that they should never own a gun. And either they're going to shoot themselves or somebody else. But I mean, the thought that anybody that would do something like that is not mentally ill is, at that moment, they are totally mentally ill, psychotic. Thank you.
Chairman Bennett, thank you. Representative Agello.
I just would like, Mr. Chairman, to respond to a couple of things that have been said. I am proud co-sponsor of Representative Caldwell's legislation. And as regards the high-capacity magazines, reducing the magazines that can be sold to just 10 rounds. If just 10-round magazines can be sold in Rhode Island, that's all that people can buy. Right now, as I understand it, magazine limits are 10 in Massachusetts and Connecticut. So Rhode Island is perhaps supplying these to other states, and Massachusetts and Connecticut have made the decision that by limiting magazine capacity in sales, they will slow down that horrifically bad actor. That's my understanding is the point of this, and I fail to see the Second Amendment damage in limiting the capacity as two of these bills do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Edith. Any further questions of the sponsor? Jose?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I wanted to state a couple of things, respond to a couple of comments, and also make a couple of my own. And Mr. Chairman, I ask you to excuse my back. There's no convenient way for me to sit to face everybody. But the first thing I would say, I want to thank Representative Caldwell for her leadership on this issue. I stand in support of these bills, and I believe I co-sponsored at least two of them. What you did today is not easy to do, to stand and speak and confront, and to do so eloquently, and so I appreciate you for your service. If I had to center this debate on any one policy objective, it would be that this is not to take away guns as much as it is to mitigate the harm. And I have a couple of points to make on that. I believe one question was asked, how would these bills prevent a new town? And the reality is, I wish our society was perfect. I don't know that there's anything we could do to completely prevent something like that happening, but I believe the specific facts, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, please let me know. About Newtown, where that the young man who committed the shooting acquired the guns from his home where they were not properly kept, which this bill would address, or one of these bills would address. And number two, with regard to the magazines and how much damage you could do, I remember the shooting that happened in January 2011 in Arizona that resulted in the tragic shooting of Congresswoman Giffords. That person had an extraordinary capacity to do harm. And so while if there were a bill to prevent these tragedies completely, obviously we would do that, but I don't think we can. And so the point of today is to mitigate harm, not take away guns. Two final things I would say, I've heard several people say that, well, the criminals are not going to obey these laws, therefore why have them? Okay, so if we follow that logic, why do we have campaign finance laws? We know that powerful lobbyists are going to circumvent those laws and give their money to other people to donate. Why make any donations at all? Why have DUI laws? Drinking is legal, driving is legal. However, when you put both of those things together, you create harm for society. So if the people who are going to do that are going to do it anyway, why criminalize it at all? Domestic abuse and so on and so forth. And so the fact that we can't stop everything is not an argument to stop anything. And the final point that I would say is that, I am really enjoying my experience as a representative so far. I'm obviously barely 3 months in. But one of the things that is so humbling about this process and what I enjoy and what I tell people about is the fact that each of us, at least in the House, all 75 of us, represent a different portion of our state. And what I've enjoyed so far is listening to and learning from the folks. I'm from South Providence, obviously, the folks from South County and the East Bay and Northern Rhode Island. And listening to each of you and learning from each of you about your communities and what your issues are, which are fairly different from mine, I feel an obligation to do a better job talking about the experience in my community. And I just want to highlight the irony and share with my colleagues the fact that in South Providence, where I have spent my entire life, where I represent, where my parents have lived since they immigrated to this country, there are law-abiding citizens who have their constitutional rights violated every day. The Fourth Amendment due process, the Fourth Amendment right from search and seizure, Fifth Amendment due process, Sixth Amendment, and so on and so forth. And so I have appreciated seeing the zealous advocacy that exists on the Second Amendment community. And I say the following phrase without trying to be funny or cute, but I would respectfully like to remind my friends, especially all the folks who've been in touch, all constitutional amendments matter. And I yield the floor.
Any other questions other than repeat? Dave, you're the last one, I guess.
All right, I wanted to respond earlier. Representative Knight, while I don't hold a law degree, I do know that I'm not the only one that finds that the Second Amendment should use the strict scrutiny test, and the government needs to have a compelling interest, not only to restrict firearms in general, but actually the high capacity magazines, because while granted it is only a panel of the Ninth Circuit, and I understand the Ninth Circuit is going to re-see this or rehear this case. In Duncan versus Beretta, the three-judge panel recognized that the California ban on high-capacity magazines was unconstitutional, and they used the strict scrutiny test and compelling interest to come to that decision. So while I may not have a law degree, I can tell you two jurists in California in the Ninth Circuit definitely agree with me on that. And quite frankly, until the Supreme Court does take this up in its entirety, your statement, it's a disagreement of opinion, not fact. So I'll stand by my question in that if we as a governmental body, I should say my statement, we as a government body are going to consider limiting an incorporated portion of the bill, an incorporated right, I think we should yield on the side of the strict scrutiny and compelling interest up until the Supreme Court has weighed in on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jason?
You know, I love to talk law. We could do it all day, so I'm not going to. But I'll say this. I'm not aware of that case, and I'm happy to look it up, and I'd be interested to see how they got there. But I will say this. The First Circuit, which is the circuit in which Rhode Island lives, has upheld Massachusetts' long-term ban on assault weapons, which has been in place since the federal ban went into effect, because when they sunsetted the federal ban, Massachusetts took action and kept the ban in their place at the state level. So that law, it's good law in this circuit, and that's Rhode Island and New England, generally speaking. And I'll take a look at the other one. There is no doubt, and I think this piggybacks a little bit on Rep. Batista's statement. It is a thorny issue, and I want to say that I respect where you're coming from, because those are not small questions about when we take action, are we thinking about and respecting the rights that are in the federal Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our state Constitution. I get that. I want to acknowledge that.
Dave, the only comment I'm going to make is you addressed the Massachusetts ban in the First Circuit. In accounting, we call something material when it's important. There's something very material, and there's a big difference between the Massachusetts assault weapon ban and the one that's being presented here. And I can tell you, the only difference between the AR-15 in my safe and the AR-15 inside my brother's safe in Somerset, Massachusetts, are all, they're nothing. There's no difference, except for the fact he can't have a bayonet lug. He has a pin in his, retractable stock. That's it. That's the only difference between those two firearms. The legislation before us is materially different than what the Massachusetts assault weapons ban is. This is a functional change versus a, I don't know, pretty change, because scary weapons versus non-scary weapons. But the Massachusetts assault weapons ban, please look it up, is totally different than the one that's being presented to us today. Thank you.
Leader Philippi.
Thank you, Chairman. And I want to thank Representative Batista for his comments. I felt they were spot on. And constitutional rights, in effect, are human rights. And if there's 4th, 5th, 6th, First Amendment violations going on in your community, those are human rights violations. And when you read the history of the Second Amendment, the purpose of it was to stop a government that would violate en masse people's human rights. So if it's going on in your community, and I believe it is, I've seen the evidence, if the people were not a strong people, we're not an armed people, think of how much more it would be happening. And we have to work, we have to stop it in your community, and all of us should stand with you. But the purpose of the Second Amendment is to protect the other rights that we have enumerated in the Constitution. And I just think we have to keep that in mind. It's not just for protecting your home, Representative Knight, and farming, Representative Knight. It's for responding to a government which history has shown the past 5,000 years can be tyrannical. Just in the 20th century, democide killed over 50 million people. I mean, we'd be foolish to forget those facts when we're dealing with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader Philippi. Seeing no other questions for the, oh, I'm sorry. Representative Roberts, the floor is yours. It's not lighting up.
There it goes. Okay, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things just very briefly. To what Rep. Caldwell had said, she said that the majority want more restrictions on gun rights. And I just would like to mention that that is absolutely not true. In my district, they want to keep their gun rights. And secondly, when you look out here, whenever there's gun legislation being heard here in the State House, there's usually thousands upon thousands of people out here compared to maybe 20, maybe 40 anti-Second Amendment people. So there is, you know, we don't really see that in the press, but the fact of the matter is usually thousands of people show up here. So right now I think it's totally unfair that they can't be here to even testify or have themselves heard. Especially during COVID. I think it's totally unfair. I don't even know why it's being heard right now. But the other thing is that I just want to respond quickly to Justine. No disrespect. I had asked you a question earlier. I wasn't saying that to be disrespectful. I was just trying to point out that if you provide facts, it's going to be, at least your argument would be a lot more convincing. That's all I was trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Roberts. Justine, you want to wrap it up?
I do want to wrap it up.
Thanks.
Thank you. And to your point, to your point, Representative Roberts, I want to say that I appreciate very much here today, especially my Republican colleagues, the leader, Sherry, David, Doc. I'll group you in with them for these purposes.
That's the first thing today that I actually may take as offensive, but that's okay.
Well, then I'm doing better than I thought. You know, I very much appreciate the horror and your willingness in public to say that these messages that I have received are terrible and they shouldn't be happening, and they are a few extremists, and they are not the people, you know, that are you know, really wanting to advance these bills. I'm only a little more senior than Jose, as he pointed out. I lost one of my sessions to COVID. But I think during the time I've been here, and I've grown to know all of you, that you know that I am not fabricating things, that I would not make them up in order to advance my agenda, that I believe in these bills without the need to do that. And so I do want to say to you that these are not extremists. These are people on the Facebook pages of your gun clubs that have promoted these bills, and to have people reach out to me. I have screenshots of people laughing about the death threats I've received on the social media pages of gun clubs in Rhode Island that maybe you go to, or people in the Second Amendment community go to. So I am not pinning that on you. And I appreciate your support, because I'm sure you know me and you don't want any harm to come to my family or I. But these are not crazy extremists that are outside your community. These are mainstream members that buy their guns at the gun clubs in Rhode Island, that think that they can say what they want and be threatening online. And I am glad to hear that you all think that is wrong. And I hope as you go back to those communities, you express that to the members there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dave, quickly.
So, on that comment, I sat on the Burrillville Town Council for 8 years. And during the power plant fight, I got death threats over a power plant. I did. I got death threats. My town council president got death threats. We were to the point where we actually had, the threat level was so high, we had regular police patrols around our homes. Those were not right-wingers. These were so-called environmentalists, the good guys. It happens in any fight. I'm sorry, Justine, if you're seeing this and it's happening. It's part of what we do. We take on hard issues. We stand up to people. People get pissed and they lash out. That's what we're here to do. We're here to take these things on. And you know what? It sucks. Plain and simple. It sucks what happened to you. It sucks what happened to me. It sucks what happened to every member of all my friends on the town council, both Democrat and Republican. But it's what happens. It's just what happens. Thank you.
But
Thanks,
that,
Dave. Hang on a minute. Yes, Doc.
Representative Caldwell, I think you and possibly Representative Agella would agree that I would never stand for anything, doing anything to any female at all, but especially any female member of this body, and I think you know that personally. Let me just say that there's no one probably who has been more vilified in the House of Representatives than myself. And I wear that as a badge of honor, because no one, well, let me be careful how I say this. No one forced us to put our names on a piece of paper to run. We did this because we want to make a change. We want to make a difference. We have differences of opinion on how we want to make that change. Perfect case in point are the bills before us today. Okay? And I'm getting to the point is, you were targeted inappropriately and unfortunately, and should never have happened, but you were targeted because you were the main sponsor of the bills. I think most of us, I don't know about all of us, but most of us at one time or another, when we have had a bill that we sponsored, have been targeted by inappropriate things, threats. You know, with all due respect to my friend Representative Place, he's absolutely correct. What happened to you was inappropriate. And I really do feel that it was the extreme. That is not the mainstream gun owner or the mainstream gun club owner. If they're on the Facebook pages, it's inappropriate. That's a whole nother issue, by the way. But it's just inappropriate. And I just want to say that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You cannot and never should categorize an entire population. I know you're not doing that. But I think it's because, unfortunately, you were the first name on the bill. I've had my first name on a number of bills, and as I said, I probably am the most vilified person in the House of Representatives. But that's what we have to deal with, unfortunately. It's inappropriate. You shouldn't have to deal with it. It shouldn't have occurred, and it doesn't cast the subject matter in a positive light. And that's all I want to say.
thank you.
Is this the real wrap-up?
I thought the last one was, so. I will
ahead.
have the last word.
Go ahead.
Doc, I agree that, of course, you would have actually actively helped preventing me from being harmed inside the State House, and I don't let anybody tar your name in my presence. I do hope that all of us here can recognize the difference in being targeted by, people who are threatening to come to your home with a gun that they so desperately want to keep. We know that these people are armed and we know they want to use their guns. And that is not to call myself a victim. That is not to complain about the role that I wanted to do. I talked about this issue. I am happy to be a leader on this issue. But it is to point out that, when people are so angry and desperate and really violent, about these issues. We have done another big issue since I've been to the State House. And I never heard a death threat. I did hear people calling me a murderer. That's the flip side. But never, like this with people who we know are armed and we know are looking to use, their firearms to hurt people. But with that said, I have certainly appreciated everybody's questions in this conversation, and I'm sure we will be continuing it in the months to come.
Great debate. We're going to move on to the next bill. House Bill 5555, sponsored by Whip Kazarian, who is in the House. Welcome, Whip. It's an act related to criminal offenses and weapons. It addresses itself to the possession of firearms on school grounds. The floor is yours, Whip.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'll try to make this as quick as possible because I know tonight's going to be long, and I have presented on this bill in front of most of you before. House Bill 5555, very easy to remember, will limit the amount of loaded guns that will be allowed to be brought onto school property. Currently in Rhode Island law, it generally prohibits guns in K-12 schools. Yet anyone who has a concealed carry weapons permit is exempt from this prohibition. This means that teachers, staff, parents, and all other visitors are permitted to legally carry hidden loaded guns in K-12 schools, as long as they have the valid concealed carry permit. This bill would close this gap in Rhode Island law. It would ensure that concealed carry permit holders are prohibited from bringing loaded guns into K-12 schools. This bill would also clarify other exemptions currently in the law, relating to law enforcement officers and retired LE officers. This bill would clarify that only current and certain law enforcement officers and dedicated security officers are permitted to have guns in schools. Rhode Island is one of only a handful of states right now that permits this. Rhode Island is one of 5 states that permits this. Again, I think this is a common sense bill. I always like to close and talk a little bit about myself as a student in Rhode Island. When I was in school in Rhode Island, I remember the Columbine shooting happening. And I remember thinking it was so awful and so scary. And then I ran for office as an elected official and saw the Sandy Hook shooting happen. And in between that, I've seen dozens of other school shootings happen across this country. Since Sandy Hook, which I thought was one of the most horrific days in American history, we've seen more school shootings happening. This bill is all about making sure our students feel safe. It's about making sure our teachers feel safe. This bill is supported by both of the 2 major teacher unions in Rhode Island. They do not want to have the responsibility of carrying guns in schools. Prior to COVID, I was able to go and speak to a lot of students across the state. They don't want their teachers having guns in schools. Teachers don't want parents to be able to have guns in schools. So again, this is about the safety of our children. This is about making sure that our schools are safe places where learning takes place, where everybody feels comfortable to participate in those types of activities. So I'll turn it over to the committee, and I want to thank you all again for letting me come to testify.
Any questions for the sponsor? Yes, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Whip. So I guess my only concern on the bill, and again, I'm not a person that believes there should be guns inside the school, but you and I have had this conversation. So someone drives on school grounds that's not a law enforcement officer, but is a concealed carry permit holder to take their child to school on their way to work would be committing a felony. And that's where I have the problem, is drop off and pick up of a student while on school grounds for someone that has to carry for their job, other than being a police officer. We're creating that person to be a felon. And I've used the example with you as a private investigator following that's a licensed concealed carry permit holder that says following somebody through either a divorce case or a car accident where there's claim of injury. Once they drive onto the school property during the school day following that individual, they have just become a felon. They're going to lose their license. They're going to get arrested. They're not going to be able to be a private investigator anymore. They're not going to be able to be an armed security guard anymore, and they will lose those rights. That's the only problem I have with this bill, is the school grounds. Again, I understand what the point of the bill is and what you're trying to do, and I think it's admirable, but the school grounds term, that's my sticking point for me.
No, I understand that concern. It's a good concern to bring up. I'll bring up the point. I was in high school, which is now a long time ago. I participated in a lot of after-school sports, and I remember parents fighting with parents. I remember parents yelling at their kids. I remember parents yelling at other people's kids. Sometimes it did get rather ugly, and I think in that situation, it would be poignant for us to not have guns partaking in any kind of escalated fights, any kind of escalated situation that might have on school grounds. To your point, I guess I would have to ask, what do these what do these people have to do when they are going to follow a client or somebody that they're supposed to watch when they go to the convention center, to a post office, even to the State House. All we're looking to do is asking them to follow those same procedures here so that, again, our students, the parents and the teachers can feel safe.
If you're gonna,
Yeah, no.
I would think if you're following someone to the post office and you're gonna watch them carry a package, you're gonna be sitting in the parking lot or across the street taking the picture. The problem is Coventry, the driveways are long to get onto the campuses of the schools, and I know when I take my child to school every day, I have to leave the roadway to get into the parking lot, to get into a large circle area, and I'm now on the school grounds of the school. Again, I am exempt from this as a retired law enforcement officer, but I can see how when you pull onto the school grounds, if you're confronted by a police officer being a law-abiding citizen who is on your way to work or doing your job on school grounds, you become a felon. And again, that is my sticking point on supporting this legislation, is the term school grounds. That's
Okay.
all.
All right.
Okay, any other questions of the sponsor? Yes, Representative Casimiro.
Hi, Whip. Thank you for introducing this bill. I am not a gun owner. I don't want to see guns in schools. I don't think they belong in schools. Is the intent of this bill to stop school shootings?
You know, if there was a single bill that we could put in today and pass that would prevent any school shooting from ever happening again, I think we would all be thrilled to sign that onto that and to pass that.
I think I agree with you 100%. I think everybody in this room agrees with you. But I don't see how this bill would stop any kind of, because you mentioned school shootings. I don't see how this bill would stop a school shooting, because if someone's going to do a school shooting, they're not worried about breaking the law.
And we don't deal with, the Rhode Island legislature is formed to create laws for people to abide by, and we're not necessarily, we sit here, we try to make laws to make sure that people will be safe, and with this bill, it's about making sure our students feel safe, our teachers feel safe. It's about prevention. It's about making sure that a gun incident wouldn't happen in a school. And God forbid something does happen. God forbid there is a school shooting. Again, our law enforcement are trained. They are prepared to go into a school, and they are trained to take out any person with a gun, including somebody that might be a good guy with a gun. We're looking to prevent any type of awful situation where, God forbid, again, somebody that is trying to help gets hurt. We're trying to prevent a situation where a concealed carry person might be coming in, trying to do the right thing, and again, is causing more harm. That's the intention of this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Yes, Chairwoman.
I just want to make a comment. I mean, we've heard this bill for the 6 years. This is probably the 6th time I've heard it. And we had such, and thank you, Katie, for bringing this again. I know you've spent many years with this bill. But the compelling testimony that we have heard over the years from the students themselves about how scared they are every time there's a school shooting, and they want this. And my kids went to school in a day where, we didn't have all of this, at least not this much, and it's way more prevalent, and the kids are scared. And if that doesn't help people make this decision, I don't know what will, because if a kid feels unsafe, whether it's rational or not, we have to make them feel safe. And how can we say it's not rational? They watch the TV and it's sensationalized. I mean, we go through way too many of these mass shootings in school throughout how many years since Columbine? I think that was the first one, but anybody who knows better than me can correct me. But thank you, Katie, and making our youth feel safe going to school again would be enough for me and should be for anyone to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I appreciate that.
Representative Jello.
Just a couple comments. Thank you, Whip, for introducing this legislation. There are a couple of scenarios that have been imagined in arguing for this legislation. One of them is a teacher or other school staff person who has a concealed carry permit and has a gun in school and puts it down momentarily to do something and then gets distracted and leaves the gun, perhaps in the floor of the bathroom, perhaps in a desk, and then a student or someone else finds the gun. That's a dangerous situation. In a case where there is an active shooter situation, someone with a gun who has a concealed carry permit is not necessarily known to the local police as someone with a gun. And so that person is perhaps in more danger themselves and certainly doesn't know the protocols and all of the practice and procedures that law enforcement has developed in preparation for the horrible possibility of a shooting going on in a school. So I think that there are real clear reasons why the presence of a gun in a school is dangerous and should be prohibited except by law enforcement at work, I think. And we make lots of laws limiting all of our rights so that we're all also collectively safer, whether it's speed limits or all sorts of things. We make laws that limit our rights so that we're all safer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do want to just quickly acknowledge Representative Agello and thank her. She's also been she's been a co-sponsor as well as a champion and a sponsor of this bill. And I appreciate your support and I appreciate your words. Thank you.
Dave.
I just wanted to respond to Representative Agello's statements. Some of what you said, there's opinion in that. We can agree to disagree on those opinions. Some of what you said isn't true. As a concealed carry permit holder, none of what you described that person doing, whether in a bathroom, in a desk, or leaving it on the floor or something like that, that's not something that can happen. That in of itself is illegal. I mean, brandishing, removing the firearm, making it going from concealed to unconcealed in any way, shape, or form, whether someone's watching or not, is already, to my knowledge, my understanding of every concealed carry class I've taken, is already illegal in multiple states. So, well, like I said, there's some aspects of your statement that are true, that can be, we can argue in terms of right or wrong. That's not something what happens. Since these concealed carry permit holders, that firearm becomes a part of your body, and you dress, you select your outfit every day based on knowing that you have that firearm on you, not to mention the training that you go through on a regular basis. So the idea that a concealed carry permit holder is just going to go to the bathroom, put the gun on the floor, and forget about it, it's not something that, to my knowledge, has ever happened. I know a couple have maybe brought it to the airport accidentally and been found at the airport with them, but if it happens, it's very rare. And I want to go back to rare while I have the microphone. I want to go back to rare. I sat in this room where we were talking about we should not be in a position in this committee talking about we should not be legislating based on rare things that happened. Very rare things. School shootings are very rare. Statistically speaking, they're very rare. A concealed carry permit holder committing a crime, the only people who are better citizens than concealed carry permit holders are illegal aliens. Illegal aliens are the only ones that commit crimes at less rates than concealed carry permit holders in our country. So, again, we can agree on the tactical nature and whether or not there should be a gun in school. We can agree and disagree on whether or not the gun should be in school, but the idea that concealed carry permit holders are regularly leaving their gun on the floor in the bathroom and forgetting about them, or taking them out and putting them in a desk, if it happens, it is exceptionally rare. Thank you.
Representative Norae.
Again, excuse me, thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm just going to go back to 1 year in jail if you get into a car accident on school property on your way to work and the police are called and come to handle that car accident. That, again, I understand the situation, Rep. Agello with going to school. I totally get it. That could be easily resolved with an order from the school department that nobody's allowed to carry a gun to school, whether you have a concealed carry or don't have a concealed carry. Again, my whole issue is just going to be on the grounds of the school property.
If I may just quickly respond to that. So just about punishment, we're looking at lines 10 through 12, which is already current law. It's a fine or imprisonment, so it's not just strictly imprisonment. I do want to make that section clear. And then, what was the second part of your argument that I forget? You can go to the next person, sorry.
Vice Chair Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's important to note that 45 other states have this law. Texas even has this law. And it is rare, I think, just as Representative Place described. But in 2013, a janitor at Rhode Island College with a concealed carry permit, and he was an NRA instructor, misplaced his pistol, his semi-automatic pistol, at school, and a police officer found the gun in a trash can on campus. His firing was upheld by the Rhode Island Supreme Court. I think this bill is aimed at, it's a lot of things. There's the active shooter scenarios that the whip described. And, you know, the FBI found between 2000 and 2019 and 305 incidents, almost none of them involved an armed citizen engaging with the shooter. So there's that angle, but there's the accidents and the misplacements. You can see a teacher bringing a gun to school, keeping it in the purse, and then I leave the purse in the restroom or under the desk, and then a first grader picks it up, and oh my God. You know, for a lot of this conversation, and a lot of the objections who say, you know, this is rare, we don't have to deal with this, it almost never happens. I would provide you the sailor analogy of if I know that my boat has a hole in it, I'm going to plug it before I go out on the water. I'm going to be proactive, which is what the sponsors of these bills are trying to do, is be proactive, because there is no question, and I defy anyone to tell me I'm wrong, that mass shooting incidents in the United States are on the rise over the last few decades. It's become a problem where it wasn't a problem in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s when my dad grew up in his gun culture. We have to have, because we have these shootings today, because we have this problem, it's our responsibility to take a look at it and be proactive. Thank you.
Jose Batista.
To Representative Place, in the court of law, there's this practice where sometimes opposing counsel call each other my brother or my sister, and so we're not opposing counsel. But on the Republican Party, with your permission, I'm gonna refer to you as my brother, in particular because we've had so many conversations, and I know you to be a compassionate and intelligent and decent man. The word and term illegal alien may exist on the books. However, there is nothing that is inhumane or alien about a human being that is in this country, irrespective of their immigration status. And so to the extent that we can, I would appreciate, and this goes, I've said it to family members that don't like it and anybody else, but I would appreciate if we call folks undocumented people.
I do my best to use the language that is
Compassionate.
most compassionate. But again, I apologize again once we get heated in the moment. Sometimes
Thank you.
the I don't want to call the redneck in me comes out, but just, you know, certain
I know
things flow. So I
know
apologize.
we don't necessarily look alike, but you're my brother, and I appreciate that.
I'm not going to argue with you. Thank you.
I do also want to actually make a comment about what Representative Place said. You know, just like, you know, you kind of had some critique of Representative Agello's comments, I have some critique of yours. We can't say this never happens. Like, the concealed carry permit holders are all these machines that would never make a mistake. Mistakes can happen. We're all humans. There's human error to take into account. And the last place we want any type of mistake or accident happening with a gun is in a school. And that's another reason why I feel most passionately about this bill. Second, I do want to talk about, talking about school shootings being rare. My God, seeing one school shooting was enough for me. I can't. And the more that we've seen, the more I have felt sick to my stomach. Enough is enough. I don't think when we talk about school shootings, we can say, well, they're kind of rare, because it's just made us all, it's given us all a really, really, really bad day, and it's really affected a lot of us. So I want to say that. Thank you.
Leader Philippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we are all brothers and sisters in here, and like family, we can speak frank with each other. And I'm just having a problem reconciling that the comments that school shootings are a crisis, they're on the rise, and I agree they are, but at the same time we want to disarm teachers who are the first line of defense from those school shootings when we know police response times are 3, 4, 5 minutes, and 5 minutes in it's too late. So I'm just having a hard time reconciling the two positions. We have a bunch of teachers and students that are essentially sitting ducks without anybody in there unless there's armed security, which I don't know how many schools have. We don't have any teachers there if we pass this bill that can protect their students. So I would suggest to the committee that if you are to go forward with this, let's have an exemption for teachers that are trained by the Rhode Island State Police in how to protect a school that they're in from a mass shooting. Maybe we should set up some type of training system for teachers that would exempt them from this law, because I'm hearing all the problems about mass shootings. We're seeing it. It's the basis for Justine Caldwell's, Representative Caldwell's bills. It's spoken about on this bill. And so how at the same time can we say, but we want to disarm teachers who may be the first line of defense? I'm just having a hard time. And my sister, Whip Kazarian, I'd love to hear the response.
Thank you, Leader. I appreciate your response. I know you feel passionately about this issue. If we do that, we're not listening to our students. Our students don't want their teachers to have guns in schools. And frankly, we won't be listening to a majority of our teachers who also don't want guns in schools. I just thinking about the predicament of, a teacher having a concealed carry permit. Maybe a group of the other teachers don't want to work at that school anymore. What happens to the staffing at that school? I think we need to listen again to our students, to our teachers, to our parents, and the majority of them don't want guns in schools, and that's what this bill does.
Maybe we can find a middle road, though. If this is to pass, we can find a middle road where teachers could get intense. They take a couple months in the summer, go through all the state police training courses, and they're allowed to do it. I don't support the bill. I like the current law the way it is, but if we're going to go forward with it, why would we disarm a teacher who's been properly trained by the state police to protect their students? I think there may be a compromise here, because I just see a completely disarmed school, mass shootings on the rise. I just don't get it. There's like a disconnect here.
I think the likelihood of a teacher being able to have a concealed carry permit and take out a school shooter is far less likely to happen than a teacher having a concealed carry permit, there being human error, and a mistake happening, an accident happening, and that's what I'm more concerned about.
Yeah, totally. And there's no absolutes in this debate, right? It's like there's no such thing as a good guy with a gun, right? And I can pick examples. There was a shooting in Texas within the past year where a good guy with the gun stopped a massacre, right? And there's probably examples where a good guy with the gun screwed up, right? And he got shot by the cops, right? There's no absolutes. I just can't reconcile those positions. And why don't we work together to have like an intense state police training program for teachers? Maybe they're ex-military. Like, why would we say an ex-Marine who's now a teacher can't be trained by the state police and have a firearm in school? No one needs to know, can't tell anyone, has to be on his or her body the whole time. There's just ways to do it where we're not so strident in our positions that it's black or white, it's no guns or, free for all. Like, there's got to be a middle ground, and I just see with this, it's something where we got to put our heads together and do something better than what's in the bill, respectfully.
And respectfully, I'm doing this on behalf of the teachers and the students and the parents in our state, majority of which who want this protection. So respectfully, I understand your point.
Yeah.
You understand mine.
Yeah, and totally. And our job is to, like, you know, put our heads together and be rational and, like, say, okay, this is what, like, the students are clamoring for, but, you know, they're students, and, you know, they may not have the full life experience that all of us have, and, you know, we're the lawmakers, and we were elected to make the laws, and I think it should be our judgment, not driven by, you know, 51% of teachers or 60% of students. You know, we have to do what we think is best, not, you know, follow the polls, respectfully.
Okay, let's move on.
Move on. Thank you, though.
Chairwoman Vella-Wilkinson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Whip, I can appreciate what you had said earlier about your motive wanting to keep the schools safe. And I'll tell you that a number of years ago, when I was in community college back in New York, I was in a building where there was a shooting that took place. It was the student who had brought in the gun because he objected to a grade that he was getting from a professor that in his mind was ruining a straight 4.0 GPA that he had had since he was in elementary school. And he was very upset about it. He had tried speaking to the professor a few times, and finally he decided that the only recourse that he had was to bring in a gun, which he had initially planned to threaten the professor with, and he ended up putting his finger in you know, on the trigger and fired at the professor and killed the professor, by the way. So again, I understand what you're saying with this bill, but going back to what Representative Knight said, that, you know, if the sailor has a hole in the boat, he's going to plug it up. You know, what are we doing to make sure that we don't have students that are bringing guns into the schools? Are we looking at locker searches? Are we looking at having students use clear school bags so that we could see if they're bringing in contraband that could be of a danger to other students in the bathrooms, or that, you know, in case bullying gets completely out of control? And with regards to the idea of someone that carries concealed being the cause of a shooting, I just want you to consider this. We just came from a year, basically, in lockdown at home. So all of these thousands of gun owners that we have across the state of Rhode Island, if they weren't working, they were home, their children were home, the guns were home. So if, as Representative Caldwell said, not all of the gun owners, not all of us are locking our guns appropriately, then we have children that had access to guns at their virtual schools for over a year. And I don't think there was any misfiring. I don't think there were any shootings that happened at home while these kids had free and easy access to guns. So I just, again, in looking at the bill, and I appreciate the fact that you said that, you know, if you need to tighten up the language, I would hope that you would put something in your bill that would talk about students bringing in guns. I know you mentioned if there was a juvenile adjudicated as a delinquent going through family court and so forth. But before they get to that point, maybe we should be looking at, again, having locker searches, having random locker searches, having the local police randomly go through the hallways with the dogs that could smell explosives. Now, I'll tell you that I had this conversation with people who have reached out to me in support of this bill, and some of the mothers were really irritated with me and said to me they didn't want their child to go into a police state when they went to school. Well, do you want your child to be safe? They don't want metal detectors. They don't want clear cases because, you know, the child has the right to privacy. Well, so what are you going to put a higher priority on, the right to privacy or the safety of the child and the safety of the teacher, as you so eloquently had put? I think there has to be more thought and there should be more moving parts with regards to keeping schools safe for our children, and not forgetting that sometimes the people we have to keep our students safe from are other students.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But you made, you know, excellent points. Your personal story is heartbreaking, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. You know, with COVID, children have been learning from home, and luckily, the incident where one could bring one to a school, again, where there are lots of children around, wasn't as likely this year, or wasn't as plausible this year because they were working from home. I will say I'm willing to work on anything to make our schools safer, but when I was in college, I actually took a class on education, and part of the assignments for the class were to go and visit schools throughout New York City, and check out their classrooms, their schools, what they were like. And being a girl from Rhode Island, I was horrified. The first school I went to in the Bronx that had metal detectors, and I was horrified at the way the students were all treated like they were already criminals. And I saw it when they would first walk into school, and I just remember thinking, wow, what a way to start your day. Why would anybody want to come here and learn? And I just really hope we don't go down that path. But I do hear your concerns, and I think they are valid, and I think whatever we can do to make schools safer, we should take serious consideration, and I'd happy to work with you on that.
Any further questions of the sponsor? Yes, Representative Caldwell.
Thank you, Whip, for introducing this bill, which I am a strong supporter of. I just wanted to make a remark to your conversation with you and the leader, Blake, about your question about mass shootings and the guns in schools, and it not being the decision of, the 16-year-olds and the teachers who are there, and I hear that. What I just want to say is that I know a lot of law enforcement officers are also in favor of this bill, because if there were to be a mass shooting at a school, they go there, right, with the intent to get the person there with a gun trying to shoot students and teachers, and that can cause a lot of chaos and confusion. And I will say that I have had a lot on my plate with my bill, so this is not the one that I am the most expert in, but I have talked to law enforcement who probably will testify tonight, and you will be able to ask them about that. So I do think there are other people besides the teachers and the students at the schools who are in support of this bill for school safety.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the presentation by the whip.